Easter Sunday, the 99th running of Paris Rubé, and the weather is as we always imagine it should be, but it very often isn't. Hello again everybody, I'm Phil Liggett, joined in commentary with Paul Sherwin, and yes, an American cyclist is going out favoured to win this event over the 47 kilometres of cobblestones and a total of 254 kilometres. As you can see, it's raining here at p.1. We're 80 kilometres outside of Paris, and the riders are not too eager to come out of their cars. The overall distance of 254 kilometres, the only real change to the course this year is we go into the forest of Arenberg the opposite way. The way we did until 2 years ago, and then they said it was too fast and too dangerous. Well, to counter that, there's now a new section of cobblestones that should break the field up before they go into the forest. Well, let's go to Paul Sherwin, he's in the rain as well, and talk to some of the riders.
Stewie, what are you laughing for? This is crazy.
It's going to be awesome. It's going to be it's the definition of hell of the north. It's going to be a very big day, good adventure.
What are you looking for when we go to the first section of cobblestones?
To be in the first five. Today's just going to be a day of tactics, but just to be in the first 5 to 10 riders pretty much in every section. If the roads are going to be so slippery and so muddy that you just have to lose a bit of concentration, which is obviously going to happen at some stage along the road, and you could find yourself from the back of the bunch just swinging in the mud.
On a day like today, it's really much more important to get into the first section of cobblestones in the first 5 or 10. It's almost going to be a race to the first section of cobblestones like the bunch sprint.
Yeah, well, it seems to be, most years when it's dry, it's pretty much the same thing, but now that it's wet, it's just going to be so much more important. And if you got to have a lot of luck on your side today, hopefully no punches and a minimal amount of crashes.
It's a bit crazy. I talked to quite a few guys this morning, and they all seem to be super motivated with this bad weather.
Yeah, it's sick, isn't it? It's going to be fun. Thanks.
Two quick questions. Georgie, these are unbelievable weather conditions. Are you worried about them?
No, I actually prefer this weather for myself today. I just need a lot of luck. I feel like I'm as prepared as I can be, and just pray for luck.
A lot of the ex-bike riders are around here now with big smiles on their faces because they know today is going to be a monumental Paris Roubaix.
Yeah, today's going to be epic. There's no question. So let's hope that we see some Americans up there.
Good luck, George.
Thank you.
George.
Good luck, George. Max, bit of a crazy morning. How's the morale?
It's good. Tough day for tough guys.
It's definitely going to be a tough day for tough guys, but it's also very important to ride in the first 4 or 5 places in the cobblestone sections.
Yeah, especially I'll say the first 3 or 4 cobble sections are very important. Just because of crashes and stuff like that, you need to be really in the front. So I never did a Paris Roubaix under the rain, but I need that one also.
Franco, you're about to ride the last Paris Roubaix of your career. It must be a very emotional day. It's very emotional. This morning, I'm quite relaxed. I slept well. I ate nice and quietly. But when the time came that I had to put on my shorts and jersey, something rather special happened in my body. I hope I can start really quickly just to get this pressure away from me. It's going to be a big Paris Roubaix today with this weather and the mud. Are you scared or are you happy? I hope that I don't have too many flat tires. I'm a very heavy rider, and therefore it's much more difficult with the rain to see just exactly where you're riding with your wheels. But this weather is for a specialist. You have to do all of the cobblestones. You can't ride on the side. For a rider like me, it's much better. Afterwards, I just need to be in a big day. If there's a great finish, a win maybe, the most important thing is that the team wins. If the Quick Step Mapei team wins, it'll be a double fate.
What's the morale like in the team this morning?
Fantastic. I mean, as soon as we pulled the curtains back this morning, it just went through the roof. You know, I mean, I love it. This is British weather, so it's great.
Paris Roubaix is very special, though, and you have to have a lot of technique riding over the cobblestones when they're so muddy and wet.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we rode a few sections the other day, and it was dry and it was awful. So God knows what it's going to be like today, but you know, it's the same for everyone. So it wouldn't be the Paris Roubaix without a bit of dodgy weather. Cheers.
Well, Phil, we didn't get too many riders this morning because obviously the weather conditions are pretty bad down here on the start line. But I tell you one thing, that the feeling I was getting from nearly all of the riders, present and past, is it's going to be a monumental Paris Roubaix today. Let's get to the first section of cobblestones.
Thanks very much, Paul. And as you can see from the sky there, the clouds are still threatening at the moment, though. The rain has stopped this breakaway. We're now looking here at Stefan de Jong of the Rabobank team, formed after only 44 kilometres today of the 254. And there are 6 riders in it, and de Jong is now in trouble.
Well, this is the early morning breakaway that every team has given orders to try and put a man into. You can see here Rabobank have put their man into the breakaway, but I think what's more important is the main field now are being totally led by the Cofidis team. Right up there in second position was Philippe Gaumont. There's Ludo Dirksens, the man from Lamprey, the Belgian, who was fantastic last week in the Tour of Flanders. And you get an idea here, Phil, to see the speed over these early section of cobblestones.
But look at this, we've barely had a sprinkling of the cobblestones yet. There are a total of 47.3 kilometres of them. Already the riders are absolutely caked in mud. The breakaway, as soon as they came onto the section at Troisville, the Rue de la Sucrerie, then the action has started, and they're trying to now reel in this group, which at one stage was over 6 minutes ahead. Just to set you up with the statistics, this is the 99th Paris-Roubaix, 159 miles in English, and 193 riders came out to start of the 25 teams. An east wind is blowing, but quite frankly, as we continue towards Roubaix, this race twists around so much, the direction of wind doesn't really matter.
The finale of this race is very zigzaggy right across the northern part of France, because these cobblestones, many of them are actually protected by the state of France to keep for the history of Paris-Roubaix, to try and keep Paris-Roubaix as long as possible. This race has been around for almost 100 years, and it is very important, I think, to try and keep the cobblestones, many of them being protected by a special society for the protection of cobblestones. But they maybe should think about a society for prevention of cruelty to bike riders, because this certainly is a very tough course.
Well, the 99th year, it'll be a big one next year, that's for sure. But right now, for somebody, it's going to be a big one this year. The name of the riders in the breakaway are Jens Voigt, Credit Agricole, Florent Brad of Festina, Stephen de Jong we've seen, Christophe Agneluto, former winner of the Tour of Switzerland, Stefan Bergès, his teammate, and Sylvain Chavanel. They are the riders out in front. And this at the back here now is Bergès.
Well, this is the long line of the main field. In fact, we've already got information over race radio that one man missing from the front group so far, Phil, is André Schmiel. He was involved in a very dramatic crash on one of the early sections of cobblestones, but you can see there Johan Museo, no such problems for him. He's leading the charge in the second group on the road.
And there is the second group on the road down there. As we twist and turn, we're heading out towards the Forest of Arlenberg. Still a little way to go to that yet, as the field now threads through the towns here, the industrial parts of northern France. And this rather large group now try to hunt down the leaders. It has been a most difficult day of racing already, with the attacks going early, and the riders very worried. And look at the clouds up there, Paul, and the way the rain is threatening. Thank heavens it's not snow, but you never know at this stage.
Well, you can never tell at this time of the year in the northern part of Europe. It can turn very quickly from just rain to thick snow falling on the riders. The important thing in a Paris-Roubaix like this, though, is to keep the morale high and to get to the early section of cobblestones in the first 5 or 10 places. Stewie O'Grady told us before the start how important that was, because if you don't, the crashes always happen in 14th or 15th position, and in a section of cobblestones like this, you can lose immense amounts of time.
Cofidis pressure on them because they're a Northern France team, and they've ridden well in this race in the fast. They're the riders on the right of our picture. The Roman Vainstains, the world champion, just slipping through our picture to the left there. Looks like other riders up here now are challenging for the front. There's a lot of movement going on here because the riders very afraid about these early sections of cobblestones. You certainly can't win the race at this stage, but you most certainly can go out with a nasty fall. And just look at the state of these bikes now, and this is going to become a real problem later on as we've gone back up with the leaders now. Florent Brad is the Festina boy. The green shorts there is of Jens Voigt, and Stefan de Jong has got back to the leaders now, and the leaders look as though they're thinning out anyway.
Well, we've lost 2 riders from this leading group. One man must be Christophe Agneluto, who had a puncture a little bit earlier. He was in the leading group of 6 riders. And these guys now feel continually looking over their shoulders. You can see Stefan de Jong has got another problem here, and it may well be a back tyre problem. It looks as if the tyres are okay. It could be that he's got a problem with the legs. He's coming up to the next section of cobblestones. This is section number 18. That is counted down from the top, and we have 18 sections of cobblestones left to go to the finish. For me, the most important section of cobblestones on a day like this is the Forest of Arenberg. As you said earlier, it may not be the place where you win the race, but certainly many riders in the past have lost the big bike race here.
Well, we've got Broad, Chavanel, Voigt, then we've got de Jong with the Spodder Bother at the back. We've got a group of some 19 riders getting together now behind this group. And in those, we've got riders like Ballerini. We've caught a glimpse of him. Philippe Gaumont, Servais Canavan, Johan Museo, and I'm delighted to say George Hincapie have all made that select chase group.
The big problem with George Hincapie was there didn't seem to be too many of his teammates in there. I didn't catch a sight of Yaroslav Ekimov, who we would have expected to ride up alongside George today. If he does want to be a challenger towards the end of the stage, Phil, he does need to have teammates there, which is why for the moment the Domo Farm Freaks team are in a pretty good shape, because they've got Johan Museo there up alongside Ronan Weinsteins, who I reckon is their favourite for the moment. On the left-hand side in the dark jersey, you can see Hincapie attacking these cobblestones in the first 3 or 4 places. He's riding exceptionally well today.
And these are those 19. Solzoir is where they've headed to. A lump of cobblestones over 1,200 metres just appeared on the horizon on a lovely road. All of a sudden they're racing across these cobbles, and once you get onto these cobbles, Paul, is it an illusion or do they actually accelerate?
These guys do accelerate because they have to ride fast. The faster you ride over the cobblestones, the easier it is actually. If you ride slowly, you find that you're bumping along the cobblestones, and you can feel every stone bumping up through the machine, through your arms and into your shoulders, and they do accelerate. The thought is that if they can knock 1 or 2 riders off the back of the group.
Well, conditions are atrocious. The little bit of spots on the camera lens here actually coming up from the bike riders. I don't think it's started to rain again yet. At the moment, the cobbles, though, are greasy and extremely slippery. So hard to ride now, as the riders, the 19 chasers here, still trying to get on terms with 3 men at the front, and de Jong still somewhere trapped in between, as that original breakaway now is beginning to crack. The thing about Paris Rubé, you see these long flat roads from the helicopter, but down at the moment for these riders, we're in something of a trough, and so they're out of sight of the leaders, and that will help the little trio of riders. Broad up front is having a very good season, young new pro for the Festina squad, and he's riding with some distinction already.
So is George Hincapie, fresh off his win in Gont-Wevelgem just 4 days ago. He's riding in 2nd place there right now, but you can see why it's so important to ride at the front. What very often happens is a rider cracks just in front of you, and once the gap has opened on a section of cobblestones, you cannot nail it down, even if you're the strongest bike rider in the world. Just there, wearing number 31, is a former winner of Paris Roubaix, and that is Franco Ballerini, Phil. He seems to be having a very hard time. And here's Christophe Agneluto at the back, wearing 202. He must have been caught by this group, having been dropped from the leading group of 6.
Some brave spectators here, Paul, because it is not only cold, but you stand up to your ankles in mud here, and you're feeling a real mess when you get back home at the end of watching Paris-Roubaix on a day like today. We're looking down, see we get some idea of the gap here. That would be Stefan de Jong there. Looks like he's about to get caught by the chasers. This 19-man group increasing and decreasing, and there's trouble here. Now, is this Broad in trouble? Because it looks like he might have been claimed a puncture victim, or is his bike giving up?
Well, it looks as if he has a problem. He certainly signalled to the referees there that he needed some attention for his machine. The neutral service car has come up alongside here. This is actually Sylvain Chavanel from the Bonjour team. I'm not sure what his problem is at the moment, but he's discussing something with the neutral service vehicle there. The neutral service vehicle is the car that looks after every bike rider in the road, and the service car's nearly taken him out.
Well, he's had to come back from the break, so as far as we know now, there are 2 riders left behind, and Chevenel is not at all happy. Whatever is wrong with his bike requires his own personal race vehicle and not the neutral service vehicle, so he's out of the break.
Well, that could be a pedal problem. The big problem that the neutral service vehicle has is there are so many different teams and so many different pedal sponsors, and if you don't have the right pedal and cleat combination, then you can't get onto a spare vehicle. This is the main chase group now with all the protagonists in there. The blue and pink jersey on the front there is Ludo Dirksen, the hero from last week. On the far side there is the hero from last week's Ghent-Wevelgem, just beaten by George Hincapie, that's Van Bon. This is Nico Matin on the far side. You can just see with the large helmet there, Johan Museo. Watch out for him today, Phil, because although this man is on his way back from serious injury, I reckon he's looking to try and win Paris-Roubaix again.
Well, I'll tell you, this has got all the signs of a great addition. Now, Wilfred Peters is also in here as well for the Domo team. The Domo team have had a very poor start to their first ever season. They took the majority of the Mappe riders that came from the Belgian area and put them on a new team. And the result is nothing right now, and so they're hoping to make amends today. Stefan Westermann is the rider from Telecom, moving off to the right of our picture. They look as though they've been in the saddle now for about 10 hours, and believe me, this race has hardly begun. And Ludo Dirksen, former champion of Belgium there, if there's ever a man made for the job of Paris-Roubaix, it's him.
It's very strange right now, Phil, so early on in the race with so many sections of cobblestone still to go, to see all of those guys in a group like that. They don't have too many teammates with them, and we've still got an awful long ride to get to the finish. Many of the big leaders are already being isolated from their teams, and that seems to be the situation that Georgie Hincapie is in right now, as you get a chance to see just how bad it is. This is what it looks like for the riders here when you get all the rain and mud being splattered up from the wheel of the rider in front of you. That's straight into your eyes. You can't wear glasses on a day like this because they get caked with mud in about 500 metres.
Well, Dirksen, who had a great ride in the Tour de Flanders, so aggressive and lucky to come out with only an 8th place finish, which was last of the breakaway. I think he deserved more than that, but he was certainly one of the men of Flanders. Now, will he be one of the men of Roubaix? Still out in front, Broad and Voigt, and we're not seeing too much of them right now. We've worked out there are some 17 riders here, and without doubt, we haven't seen a lot of him yet. George Hincapie is in here, and Van Bon, the top 2 of Ghent-Wevelgem. Museo is in here, without doubt the man of Paris-Roubaix over the years gone by, and Dirksen and the world champion Veensteins. Primary movers of this chase group. We're hearing, Paul, that the Chamil group, which all the way also contains, by the way, Peter van Petegem, is now 1 minute 50 behind the 2 leaders.
Well, that's going to be a tough day for Andre Chamil to try and pull himself back into this, because these are all the big names. That's Wilfred Peters there, just losing the top of the cobblestone crown there. But I have to say, Ludo Dirksen on the front there is an absolute beast. Servais Carnarvon there is the rider coming through in 4th position. The Cofidis rider there is Philippe Gaumont, a man very much at ease on the north of France races. There's Georgie Hincapie too, looking comfortable, followed by Westermann in the pink, and the Rabobank rider coming through there. I'm not sure if that was not Eric Decker. And Roman Weinstein's the world champion, seems to be in a little bit of difficulty right now.
Well, what a select group this is now, and remember, we've still got all of the big cobble sections ahead to come, yet Dirksen's just driving on. He seems to be much happier when he's doing the work here. Doesn't seem to mind that he's using an awful lot of energy in what is such a long race, because he's seeing the cobblestones first. On the right there, it's one of the neutral service motorbikes has bit the dust, and so there's no privileged people on these cobblestones. There they are.
Well, a point of interest, in fact, the race organisation saying that the only motorbikes allowed on the course, including the television and the police and the race photographers, have to be trials bikes today, scrambling bikes specifically designed for off-road use. If you've got the normal BMW 1000cc bike that we normally see in these bike races, you're not allowed to travel on the cobblestone sections. They've taken that precaution because these roads are very dangerous indeed. But this man is an absolute animal. And we've seen him in Tour of Flanders going to the front, trying to blow the race to pieces on the cobbled climbs. Today he's trying to rip everyone to pieces on the cobblestone sections. And just look at the way Wilfred Peters behind is fighting to stay on his back wheel. Point of interest is these 2 riders are actually training partners. They live next door to each other in the northern parts of Belgium.
Well, these are the 2 leaders surviving now, Broad and Voigt. Voigt is the rider in green, but the actual group is closing in rapidly, and I think the orders are coming here to move out all of the following vehicles, and there they are. Well, there's nothing anybody can do. The Dirksen is leading the chase. There are around about 17 spread out down this particular sector of cobblestones, and we're shortly going to have pulled in the last of the escapers who broke away at 44 kilometres, and we're now approaching 135. So they've had almost 100 kilometres of freedom.
Well, the big difficulty about Paris-Roubaix is actually controlling the race from the referee's point of view, because if you do get caught by a group coming up from behind, and especially on a day like this, there is absolutely nowhere the cars or the motorbikes can go, because it's very unsafe for everybody. Wilfred Peters is there now. He's taking up the pacemaking on the front. He wants to nip through the cars there and hope with the confusion that he drops one or two riders off the back, and he's mad. I want to close my eyes at the moment, the speed this man is going through here. It's a lot more scary to watch this from the television point of view than actually out on the bike, because you're totally concentrated when you're doing this. But Wilfred Peters, he is a man today.
And our TV camera doing better than most as he gets through in front of Florent Brard, this young man who turned pro in 1999, but this year's had taste of victory twice. His first 2 wins as a professional, and he's right in the thick of it with the real stars of the sport now, and he's going to wonder what has hit him here in Paris-Roubaix. Big Wilfred Peters, a star of previous Paris-Roubaix, scorches up to the outside now of Florent Brard, and he's holding his own along with Jens Voigt as they reassemble at the front.
You see what a true star and a true domestique he is. He looks over his shoulders to immediately ascertain which riders are with him coming out of those cobblestone sections. He's got a teammate there. It's hard to recognise, but the man on his right shoulder there was Servaas Knaven, the former champion of Holland. You can just spot Georgie Hincapie coming across there. The pink jersey of Stefan Weissermann is very evident for the moment. It's about the only jersey that shows up in the weather conditions that we're actually having to deal with this afternoon. Hincapie moving very much to the front there, very happy with the situation right now. It seems as if one man who has slipped off the back there, in fact, is Johan Museo. As we look at the back of the group here, this is Agneluto. He's hopefully going to stay in contact with the group. 16 sections of cobblestones left to go, 51. He rides for the Cofidis team. That's Nico Matin, a very good bike rider. He's got a couple of teammates in the front group as well, and he will be looking after today, I think, Philippe Gaumont, who seems to be in excellent form.
Well, that's Matin at the front, while this rider seems to be wanting to control this race from the front, and he doesn't worry about anybody. Ludo Dirksens, former champion of Belgium, a stage winner of the Tour de France, started as a professional very late in his career. He never wanted to turn professional until in the end people said, look, you are so strong you must. I think he was 27 before he became a pro bike rider, but he is so strong, isn't he? As he drives on, look at the scramble behind, and we can hardly recognise those who have been obliged to follow wheels, and that's the big difference, Paul. The men behind, this looks like Servaas Knaven coming through, just about recognising him, but he's covered in mud by following the wheels, whereas Dirksen's almost clean in respect, because he's setting all of the pace. Now then, they're still all together here. We are hearing that there are chase groups, and the Plankett, Schmill group, and Ballerini is still there. 1:45 back, so they're holding their own at the moment, but they've missed the vital split and they're not getting back.
See how Knaven here has adopted a different way of wearing his glasses as well. He's got them tucked onto the front end of his nose there, so that the mud comes up into the bottom part of those glasses, and he's actually peering over the top. That's a very brave move. Talking to Magnus Backstedt this morning, he was actually wearing motorbike goggles for today's race. But the real tough Belgian rider in second position there, Ludo Dirksen, there's no glasses for him. All he wants to do is ride at the front on these cobblestone sections, and you can hardly recognise the man behind him who looks as if he's in a dark suit. Well, that is Georgie Hincapie, the US postal rider who's in this group at the moment, and the group seems to have split completely over this section of cobblestones, Phil, and I think when we come out of it we will only have 8 or 9 riders in the lead.
Well, this race has started early, big time this year, and it's because of the slippery cobblestones that's done that. Still in there is Jens Voigt and Brard, but I think in fact they are beginning to find the pace a little bit too much now. I think that Jens will be a little bit upset that coming up in this forward group are none of his teammates. That was no doubt the point of his attack, but they haven't made this vital split, and Stuart O'Grady, who was hoping to be right on the sharp end coming onto the first set of cobbles at Troisville, well, he wasn't, and he's not made the split, but he did know what he should have done, Paul. He was absolutely right. The riders at the front of the bunch, when they hit the cobblestones, got away with it.
Well, that's the important thing on a day like this. This will be a legendary Paris-Roubaix. Riders will talk about it for a long time to come. And now the rain has come down. That may well wash a bit of mud off the bike riders at the moment, but it's going to make the thighs a lot more difficult because the temperature out here at the moment is not very much more than 5 or 6 degrees Celsius. And that will really freeze these riders to the bone. Hincapie looking very concentrated, a bit isolated right now because there are 3 Domo Farm Freak riders in this group. Ludo Dirksen is on his own at the moment. It may well be there's a 4th rider in there because Johan Museeuw may just be tagging onto the back of the group.
And don't forget the world champion who doesn't ride in their colours, Roman Weinstein's also in here. So maybe they've learned the lesson, Paul. It's just taken a little while to warm into the season, perhaps because they have been missing the moves, but they know you can't afford to miss a move in this particular race. There's too many imponderables. Too many things can happen to you if you're forced to chase early on for a simple mistake like missing a move, because sooner or later you might have a fall, a puncture, or just slip out of the group.
Philippe Gaumont taking a drink. Got the bands on as a former French national champion. This is Museeuw on the front, looking very strong right now. This man almost lost his life last year in a motorbicycle accident, having 2 years previously almost lost his life in Paris-Roubaix in the Forest of Arenberg. And this year, with that change, we're going back into the Forest of Arenberg in exactly the same direction that we went when Museeuw had his accident. He will be thinking about that, and certainly it was on conditions like this. So a lot of riders somewhat worried about the new approach to the Forest of Arenberg, because when you do hit that section, you're hitting it at around about 40 miles an hour going downhill on slippery stones.
Well, there's a look here at Servais Knaven. He actually has washed off a bit of the mud as he's come out of that rain right now. But I often wonder how they can wear glasses at all here, because once you rub those lenses they smear and you've still got to find your way over the cobblestones. As the riders now starting to come through again. Nico Matan is there, Ludo Dirksen. He looks so determined, this rider. He drives the race through. This is an interesting group. Philippe Gaumont, Chris Peers are other riders in this breakaway. Stefan Westerman, Van Bon, Rolf Sorensen. I haven't actually seen him. George is certainly here. Dirksen we've seen. Weinstein is always around. And we've seen Museeuw and Peters and Knaven. The other man we haven't seen much of, Paul, but should be enjoying it immensely, is the bronze medalist in the World Cyclocross Championships, Sven Nys.
This is definitely the kind of situation that a man like him should appreciate and be good at as well. Looking here at Nico Matan, there's a group of 5 riders at the moment, around about 1 minute behind that group of riders, in fact containing Franco Ballerini, a former 2-time winner, and the group of André Schmiel. And we are hearing that Schmiel is trying to ride across on his own at the moment, Phil, is at 1 minute 35 seconds. So Schmiel, a tough bike rider, he hasn't given up yet. He wants to perform well in Paris-Roubaix, but he's putting in so much effort. I don't see him catching back such a group here. That this is really the heads of state of the world of professional cycling, because there's a lot of big names in this group.
Strong, alert men have found their way to the leader group here in Paris-Roubaix this year. The 99th time, and it's turning out to be an absolute cracker. George Hincapie, the only US postal rider to make it, but that was what the plan was by the team, to make sure that George was protected as long as possible so they could get in. We're now moving on to Pavé section 15 at Haspre, and this is 1.7 kilometres, and they are absolutely flying over the mud here, and it looks as though it might be Wilfred Peters, is it, who's got the lead now?
Peters on the front, followed by Servais Knaven, third place going to Georgie Hincapie. Actually, in that little group of 5 riders at 1 minute, Phil, is also another former winner of Paris-Roubaix, Andrea Taffy, who was also involved in an accident on the first section of cobblestones, is trying to pull himself back up to the lead at the moment, but it's going to be very difficult. And in the past, we've seen the Mappé team being omni-dominant in this Paris-Roubaix Classic, and today, force of numbers at the moment is actually leaning over to the team that was formed by the split-up of Mappé, the Domo Farm Freaks, because as you said, definitely there are 4 riders from Domo Farm Freaks in this team, and at the moment the 2 men doing the bulk of the work on the front are Servais Knaven, followed by Wilfred Peters. Johan Museeuw taking a little bit of a backseat, and I think he's obviously reserving himself for the final few kilometres.
Well, that would be the likely tactic. Workhorse Servais Knaven here, former champion of the Netherlands. There he is, speaks very good English, and a very nice friendly chap when you meet him outside of Paris-Roubaix, but right now concentrating on the job in hand. Pavé sector 15 we are on now, 145 kilometres done, and he's got himself on the front. even if you wanted to let somebody come through, it would be nearly impossible to do so. You don't move sideways, left or right on these pavés because they're so slippery right now. You just concentrate and drive on by yourself. There's a long thin line. We've made it 16 riders in this leading group now, and they're getting away. They're still looking at nearly 2 minutes back to Schmiel, who apparently is chasing with Van Petegem, but we've seen nothing of this because our cameras are committed here with the leaders. And if they did fall back, Paul, to pick up the chase, they might never regain the front.
Absolutely not. The man on the back here is the third Cofidis rider in the group. This is Chris Pearce. But the front of the group, you can see on a day like this, Phil, when the weather conditions are absolutely atrocious, it is very difficult, as you said, to go past the rider to overtake. The rider on the front always wants to ride on the crown of the cobbles. You see how it sumps down on the left and right hand side of the road there. That is where the cobblestones get broken up, and that's where you end up getting impact punctures. So you can see Servais Knaven riding with a lot of pressure, a lot of power on the front here. He's trying to set the race up for his teammates because they realise with 4 men they're definitely in with a chance today. Domo Farm Frites looking for the big win. They haven't had a real big win since the start of the season, yet they have been billed as one of the #1 teams in the world. But it's always difficult when you set up a brand new team to organise everything, to have the automatic responses that you need out on the road with a group of riders you bring together for the first time.
Knaven setting the pace. He knows what it's like to get to the stadium at Roubaix. He's 12th last year, and he's now 30 years of age. Servais has been a pro for 7 years. It seems like last year when he turned pro, because I followed his career with some interest, having made reasonable friends with him in Australia in the early 90s. But looking down from my helicopter now, the field's absolutely sodden with what has been a very wet and cold early spring here in Belgium and indeed all over Europe. As we now leave that stretch of pavé and continue slowly but surely towards the forest of Arenberg, where there is a huge crowd and some very bad cobbles waiting. One more stretch to come at Havluy, Paul, and this is a stretch which we're seeing for the first time, I think.
Well, let's hope the water is gone. They've actually tried to pump water out of this section of cobblestones over the last few days. It's a brand new section that was brought into Paris Roubaix to make the approach to the forest of Arenberg a smaller group. They figured that this section of cobblestones would actually split up the field, and that way only have a group of 30 or 40 going into Arenberg together. Right now the organisation must be quite happy because this leading group is only 16 riders for the moment, so we will be going into Arenberg with a smaller group, but already it's a huge group of names who we expect to see at the front in Paris Roubaix, and these guys, all champions in their own right, are now looking at fighting out more than 100 kilometres before they get to the finish line.
Well, looking here at the leaders, situation behind Andrea Tafi himself, the past winner of this event, is riding at 1:15. He's missed the split. Then we've got Karsten Kroon, and we've got also Franco Ballerini, twice a winner, at 1:22, and Andre Schmiel and Peter Van Petegem in a group at 1:50. They're the time checks reaching us, but right now the pressure on at the front and nobody waiting for anybody. Sitting again at the back here is Agneluto. Was part of the original breakaway. He had a flat tyre while he was in that, but he's now fallen back a ways.
This is the group there. In fact, that looks very much like Franco Ballerini's group, so this will be the second big group on the road trying to ride themselves in. Just off the front of this group will be Andrea Tafi. You can see one rider there, Phil, just trying to ride away. He was in this group a little while ago, and he may well now be thinking that he is strong enough to ride across to the front group. But with those big names in the front, 1:15, 1:20 seconds is a very difficult call.
Official cars there moving off the road to let the breakaway through. We're heading now to Havluy. A next stretch of cobblestones. After that we'll be into the forest itself. Everybody afraid of the next section of cobblestones. At one stage the organisation were going to pull it completely out of the race. They said they could not drain the water out of the holes, but they seem to have taken some recompense from that all week, and it's dried a little bit for them, although the rain has been falling overnight and occasionally since we left Compiègne. There's the world champion, Weinsteins, in the white jersey. It's amazing, that's still white after the ride today, I think, as Wilfred Peters off to the right. He used to have a white jersey as well, Paul. And behind him is Servais Knaven. And here comes Ludo Dierksens again. Johan Museo taking more interest at the front now. This group has got a very good rhythm going, and with 4 Domo riders in it, numerically they're in big strength here.
chance here to see the faces on these guys. It is very concentrated. They realise there's a lot of work to be done before they get to the finish. Right in the middle there, in the red and white jersey, you can see Rolf Sørensen. Good to see him, almost 36 years of age, riding at the front of the one-day classics again. Kind of a rebirth, I think, for Sørensen, riding now for a fully Danish squad. The first time in his career that he's been able to do that, and I think he will be trying to show the clean pair of wheels to the younger members of the team. The only way to lead, I suppose, is by example, and that's a great example we're getting from Rolf Sørensen here today. The world champion, I reckon, though, must be the #1 man for Domo Farm Frites. They tried to bring him into Tour of Flanders in an ideal position, and today, if we go onto the stadium like this man has got a great chance of winning. But this race, I feel certain, Phil, will split up an awful lot before we get down to the finale.
Jens Voigt having problems with his vision now as he tries to clean the lenses, and the more you rub them, the less you'll see, I would suspect. As the man who started the move at 44 kilometres out is doing very, very well to still have legs to stay with this rather select front group here, which is now a further 100 kilometres down the road. We're around about 150 kilometres covered now, so just over 100 kilometres to go. And the sign that when the race usually starts is coming through the forest of Arenberg. I would suggest it started a lot earlier than that today. Slipped away a little bit here now, further down the group. This is the Ballerini group, and trying to keep control of things. Taffy is back in it, and so we've picked him up. He's number 37 there. And they are riding about a minute and 20 seconds behind that front group.
Well, there's still a possibility for these two former winners to ride themselves back up to the leading group of 16. Last time we saw the leading group, though, Phil, they were all riding very well together. The rider in the yellow jersey there of Team Coast is Frankie Hoy. He's the leader, really, for the classics of this new team. The team which, during the winter months, signed up some very big names like Alex Zuller and Fernando Escartin, in a hope to try and qualify for the Tour de France. The selections would be made in around about 1 month's time, which is why it's much more important this year for a lot of the teams to ride well in the classics, because in previous years, the selection for the Tour de France has been made during or after the Tour of Italy.
Now, these riders not really organised here, probably mixed feelings from one or two of them because of their teammates up in the breakaway. But Nico Matan is up in the breakaway, as we have said, but Ballerini here would love to be. This is his swan song. Goodbye to all of this pain, toil and tears for him. There he is. This wonderful man has brought so much happiness to Paris Rubé. He thinks this is the greatest race in the world, and because of the treatment he receives from the French public, it's strange to say this, an Italian choosing a top French race to say his farewells. And when this race gets to the finish, they will have an official reception on his behalf at the finishing line.
Certain riders end up having a love affair with Paris-Roubaix, and certainly Franco Ballerini has had one. He first won the event back in 1995, and then he came back and won it again in 1998. But he always has tried to make this the most important season, the most important rendezvous of his season. He's built his whole classics program around riding well at Paris-Roubaix. It's a difficult thing to do, but he has earned himself the name as a specialist of this great one-day race. This man we're looking at right now on the front, Phil, is also a specialist of Paris-Roubaix. That is Johan Museo, and what a great comeback it was after smashing his kneecap in the forest of Arenberg and fighting back to come up once again to take the win out in this race, and it would be amazing if he could win it again today.
Yes, it certainly would, and boy, would everybody be happy at Roubaix, because although we're in France, they love again the man who comes from just over the Belgian frontier, which is only a few kilometres away, of course, from Roubaix. Clouds are lifting a little bit, I hope. I'm not sure that I'm saying that to convince myself or to help the riders out here, but certainly as we race now towards the forest, the coal heaps in the distance as we head to the area where they once mined coal, and where the coal mines have now become something of national monuments, we are racing in. Remember last year, Paul, when we met Jan Slablanski at the Forest of Arenberg, he claimed to be the only man to have been above and below the ground there.
Well, Jan Slablanski, of Polish origin, moved to the north of France with his family just after the war, and he actually became a miner in the mine head, which is just above the Forest of Arenberg, and he thought it was quite amusing. I don't think he worked down the mines too often, maybe only 7 or 8 months, but he went on to become a brilliant bike rider, including a title at the World Championship level, and certainly was one of France's great heroes.
Dirksen's patching up a little bit of a gap in the lead group there in that mauve jersey, but they've all come back together again. Now we're seeing the helicopter traps underneath there, which are those electricity cables on pylons. You've got to watch out for those when you're concentrating on filming Paris-Roubaix from a helicopter. But that means we are heading now towards the Forest of Arneberg. Still a little way to go. We're out in the country as this little group, for the moment, I sense a little lack of coordination here. The riders not really getting it together. Well, if that's bad up front, look at this behind. They're losing ground wholesale here because they seem to have almost stopped racing in that second group right now.
I think most of these riders being caught out by the fact that the race really split up on the early sections of cobblestones. This is another group further down the road there. That's Maximilian Chiandri on the far side. And these riders, I would say, at the moment, must be trailing by around about 3 minutes. A chance to look inside this group. In fact, Andre Schmiel is in this group. This is the Schmiel group. This is the third group on the road. And I reckon, Phil, that he is around about 1 minute and 40 seconds behind the leaders right now. So for him, I would say his Paris-Roubaix today is absolutely doomed.
Well, they're waving at the camera. I can't believe this, but they are convinced they're not going to see the front of the race today. Well, Schmiel won't be kept into that category. If he senses that, I'm sure he will try to move up because he's a very determined rider and he's won this race in the past. Coursing over the canals here in northern France.
Well, we have one more section of cobblestones to go, Phil, before we get to the Forest of Arneberg. The Forest of Arneberg is 13 sections to go to the finishing line. And on the front here, this looks like Jens Voigt, so he too must have been left behind from the front group. Voigt in the front group earlier on. In fact, no, he's still, this is the front group.
Yeah,
bit of chaos here on the roads of Paris-Roubaix, but this is what the bike race is like when you're in weather conditions like this. Nobody really knows what is going on in the bike race. Most of all, the team management have a hard time keeping in touch with their riders because the race can be split up from front to back by around about 10 minutes. The team managers actually go out the week before Paris-Roubaix to try and see if they can find shortcuts in the race so that they can actually overtake dropped riders and get right up behind their men if the race does split up.
There's Rolf Sorensen tucked in at the back. It is amazing how Johan Museo can sense the moves. He never misses a breakaway in these early classics, despite all the personal problems he's had with his injuries these past few years. This man reads a bike race better than anybody else on the circuit right now. And we're looking at a rider here who knows what it's like to win Paris-Roubaix. And well, if he could win it this time, it would be extraordinary. The defending champion looking very good just now.
Hans de Klerk, the Lotto rider on the back there, he won't do very much in this group, Phil, because he will be getting information all of the time about the position of Andre Schmiel, and I can tell him right now, Andre Schmiel is losing big time. He's a minute 40 behind. He's hardly made any inroads into the deficit, which at one time was a maximum of 1 minute and 50 seconds, so he really seems to be hovering. This is the second group on the road. This is in fact, this is the first chance we've had to see the new leader of the World Cup, Gianluca Bortolami, after his win last week in the Tour of Flanders. So he too is trying to pull himself back into the race. There is Taffy then, as well as Ballerini, who's also in this group.
Well, Gianluca could be losing that white leadership jersey to the more consistent Weinsteins if it's to finish like this, because Weinsteins yet again has put himself into a leading breakaway on a World Cup event. There's still a couple of more World Cup races to come before we close down for the early part of the season. We've still got Liège-Bastogne-Liège and the Amstel Gold. Lance Armstrong's rumouring he's going to start in Amstel Gold, by the way. We haven't seen him in any of the World Cup races yet.
Just on the back of that group as well, Christophe Agneluto, one of the riders in the early breakaway of the day with 6 riders. Going through there, wearing number 5 is the big strong man Wilfried Peters. Number 1 is Johan Museo, as last year's winner. And one man who is doing a magnificent ride, really, is this young man, Florent Bras from Festina. He was in the early breakaway, still surviving. And what a chance it is for him to ride Paris-Roubaix and look at the faces and ride alongside names like Museo and, of course, Georgi Hincapie, who won Gand-Wevelgem just a couple of days ago.
You know, talking of George, Paul, we know he's here. We don't see him very often. He's riding a canny race right now, I think, knowing that the teams are up against him. And knowing now, after his great win in Ghent-Wevelgem, they respect him more than ever.
Well, he is, I really think, before the start of this race, regarded as one of the top favourites to take out the victory. There is Jens Voigt. George, I think, Phil, has changed his riding tactics. He's a lot more aggressive. In the past, for example, that move in Gand-Wevelgem a couple of days ago, he would not have reacted to. He would have waited for another rider to try and chase across the gap. He made the decision. He saw the move going and leapt on it immediately. When it came down to the sprint, he was very calm and collected and put in a perfectly timed finish. Right now, he's in a difficult situation because although you can see by the way he's pedaling, he's got good form, the legs are good, the sun finally is coming out here on Paris-Roubaix, but he's isolated. If he has the slightest mechanical problem, he's going to have a hard time getting back. Domo Farm Frites have got 4 riders here. Cofidis have got 3 riders. Rabobank have got 2. Georgie Hincapie is totally on his own.
Yes, and this also reminds us, if George had accepted at once the offer to join Mappe, which would have taken him away from the American teams, and of course which he turned down, then would he have won a classic race before this year? Many people think he would have done, because Mappe, until this year it appears, they were a great classic riding team.
But George Hincapie has got what it takes to win a Tour of Flanders or a Paris Roubaix, and it may well be today that he's got the chance, but he does have to ride a very intelligent race now. He's actually there, Phil, 3rd from the back of the line at the moment. He's going to let Domo Farm Frites do a lot of the work, and he's moved right up to the front right now. He has to pay attention on the cobblestone sections and try and hide on the tarmac sections of the road when it's a lot smoother, keep himself out of the wind. Dirksen also is not worried at all by the armada of Domo riders in this group, because on this section of cobblestones we are now on section number 14 to go to the finish line. Dirksen comes to the front, puts the hammer down, wants to blow as many riders off the back of the group as he can.
He's not blowing George off. George is paying quick attention. This was the cobble stretch that they all feared. Every team came and took a look at this, and none came away with a favourable reply. But now they're on it, and this, as I say, a new stretch which lines the riders up. The idea was to break the field up before we entered the Forest of Arlenberg in what is now known as the dangerous direction. But indeed, the organisation didn't count on the weather this year, because the weather has broken this field up long before this stretch. You can see that the cobbles have been very muddy. There's about an inch of it still lying there. But only a couple of days ago there was genuine concern they would not be able to drain any of the flood water off this stretch of roads. Dirksen, this man, just loves the cobblestones, straight onto the front now, but it's nice to see Hincapie taking no chance whatsoever and has gone there now into 2nd place.
Just look at the mud getting thrown up from Dirksen's wheels there as he tries and battles, in fact, to stay on the crown of these cobblestones. If there are any good Italians watching this today, they would be saying, "Che bestia, what a beast." This man is an absolute animal over these cobblestones. And you see all the other riders, they're having problems at the back there because they can't exactly see which line to follow because of all the dirt that is being sprayed up into their eyes from the rider in front. 3rd position there is Philippe Gaumont, a previous winner of Gand-Wevelgem, following number 111, who is this year's winner of Gand-Wevelgem. And Gaumont's gone straight by. He's mad. He's absolutely crazy, but he loves this race. You have to love this race to come here. I don't know how he held that up, Phil, but he really just flicked the back wheel straight.
And he just automatically corrected it. A reflex action, didn't fall, and there he goes again and does it once more. You can't look over your shoulder and hope to ride these cobblestones. But this group, I think when we come off these cobbles, we will find they have been stretched now, because Gaumont has lifted the ante a little bit more, but Hincapie is staying well in touch. This is going to be an absolutely superb race now to the Forest.
Absolutely magnificent. When they come out of this section of cobblestones, they have 8 kilometres to go to the Forest of Arlenberg. Peters is the man on the left-hand side there, but his teammate, Servais Carnarvon, is riding a race as if he was possessed today. He realises they've got a great favourite in their midst, Johan Museo, who's in good form, I reckon, and Ronan Weinsteins. He's the Dutchman on the squad. He's on the front there, hammering along. Moving up there is one of the riders, it looks like Sven Nys, who is still a cyclocross man at the front of Paris Roubaix, and that doesn't happen very often. The best, most famous cyclocross man ever to take part in Paris Roubaix was Monsieur Paris Roubaix himself, Roger de Vlaeminck, who took out a World Championships at the cyclocross, but he went on to win Paris Roubaix 4 times, which I think was a lot more important to him.
If memory serves me right, Paul, with Roger de Vlaeminck, he didn't didn't have a single flat tyre in the first 11 times he rode this race, which is quite an unthinkable record. It'll never happen again.
The thing about de Vlaeminck was that he was such a magnificent bike handler, and he was able to let the front end of his machine float, and he seemed to always find the smoothest section of cobblestones, and he would ride over these cobblestone sections around about 40 miles an hour. Quite remarkable. I remember one year when I actually didn't ride Paris-Roubaix with the pros. I'd had an injury just 4 days before. I split a muscle open, and I came to see the race from the side of the road. You don't feel the speed as a bike rider because you're concentrating on the guys in front of you, but if you stand at the side of the road, the speed with which they hit the cobblestone sections is absolutely remarkable. This is Schmiel.
This is Schmiel. He's shed himself over everybody else. This is almost a show of desperation here from André Schmiel. We've got him timed at 2 minutes, and he's trying to desperately cross the gap alone now. He sensed, Paul, that group were not going to come back. We saw them wave at the camera. They'd already seen the end of their Paris Rubé, and this man says, right, it's me or nobody.
He's a tough man. He's one of the oldest bike riders in the profession right now, and he saw the rest of the group. The morale had gone away from that group. So he thought, well, I've only got one thing left to do, and that's to try and ride across on my own. He can only hope now, Phil, coming onto this section of cobblestones, with 8 kilometres to go to Arenberg, that there is chaos in Arenberg, and he manages to get onto the tail of the group. It's going to be a hard shot, but only one man, I think, in this race today could pull it off, and that is André Schmiel.
Well, this is a horribly long stretch of this race, 2.5 kilometres now. It's coming to an end for what is looking like 7 leaders here, as they swing off the pavé, and we are now 157 kilometres covered. Chance to regroup, no big effort there. As Peters checks on his radio, we go back to André Schmiel. Has he got a problem here, or is he just struggling?
No, he's got a few problems there. It seemed as if his pedals were giving him some jip there as he tries to balance his machine on the top of the cobblestones. That ridge at the top is the most important place to ride when the weather's like this, and it seems to me as if he's lost a certain amount of his impetus. But this road is a very difficult road to keep your stability on, and André Schmiel is having a hard time today. He will get out of this section of cobblestones, and then he's going to have to ride 8 Ks on his own till we go to the next section, which will be the Forest of Arenberg, and I think then we'll see him start to lose time on the leaders.
Well, I know he's had a lot of bad luck today, and I think that was the main reason he missed the split coming through Troisville, but he's paying for it now with a lot of serious effort very early on here in Paris Roubaix. You get some idea of the deficit because we're heading up to those houses there and the right turn, and we've seen the leaders already make that turn, so he is probably not gaining any time at the moment. Chance to look at his face, and it looks rather easy from the back, doesn't it? Then you get a glimpse of his face and you see just how hard he is trying.
Well, the bad thing for him is he can see in the distance the race helicopter is over the breakaway, so he can ascertain just exactly how far behind he is. It's a brave move by a man who was caught out in the first section of cobblestones in a pretty nasty accident and delayed by probably up to 3 minutes, because if you're at the back of the group in the first section of cobblestones, you do lose that amount of time. He's currently, the last time check was 1 minute and 40 seconds behind, and trying to ride across on his own is a monumental task, because the guys at the front, although they seemed a little disorganized coming off that last section of cobblestones, will immediately get themselves organized again because of the fact we've got 3 very big teams represented with multiple riders present.
Sven Nys going through again, trying to make a switch, and not an easy one at that, from cyclocross to road racing, but except today, of course, when one could forgive him for feeling at home. This is Weinstein's here, and now has he got a problem because he's talking to the team? No, he's moving back, he's coming back on. I think, in fact, Museo punctured. We thought he had, and we didn't see him. Now Weinstein is bringing him back onto the group here.
This is a pretty strange move, because we are now looking at a world champion pacing on the team leader. The team leader, Johan Museo, is coming back for injury. Now that says one thing for me today, Phil. That says that the leader of the Domo Farm Frites team today is Johan Museo. When a world champion drops back for somebody in his team, that tells you something. The team have confidence in Museo today. They feel that he can win this bike race again.
Well, they brought him back, or at least Weinstein is bringing him back. Stefan Wesserman, who has also joined in there, he's had a bike change. Again, our cameras missed it, but he's now coming back and will be very grateful, I think, for the help of the World Championship Express there. That should bring us back to our original 16, because there was 12 here and 4 just coming through the cars. There they are. So nobody lost on the cobblestones, although we came close to losing Museu and Wesserman.
It's good to see the Festina rider, Florent Bras, is still in there as well. He's one, I would say, the only survivor. Another problem at the back, that's probably Sven Nys, the Rabobank rider, who also has stopped there with a problem. There are only 2 Rabobank riders in this leading group, the other man being Karsten Kroon.
So Nys has gone back. Just a quick count, quick head count there, revealing this breakaway more or less back together again. And we've lost Sven Nys. The Rabobank man who was here is now temporarily behind. He should get back, because when you ride Paris-Roubaix, you put the pressure on the cobble sections and rest if you can in between. There's no attacking each other at this point. It won't be that way, of course, towards the end, but right now there's still a long way to go.
It's actually a lot harder on the cobblestone sections than on these sections of tarmac. This is where they do recuperate a little bit, set the tempo, expecting everybody to come forward and share the pacemaking at the front before the next assault on the cobblestones. And when the weather is like this, it is so important, the cobblestone sections, to hit them in the first 5 or 10 places. This is Chris Peers on the front here, followed there by Nico Martin. In about 4th position, Philippe Gaumont. So Cofidis very strongly represented here. Cofidis is a team from the north of France. Their head office is not too far away from the stadium in Roubaix, just along the motorway which heads up to Ghent. It's a loan company, and at the moment they're loaning a lot of effort into the front of this main field.
We are approaching 160 kilometres into the race now, and we're approaching the Beecher's Brook in Grand National horse racing terms of this event as we come towards the long stretch of cobblestones through the forest. 2.5 kilometres of them are awaiting the riders now.
This is a long section of cobblestones. We're about 5 kilometres away from there right now. Wilfred Peters in great form right now. A little laugh for him as he comes up alongside Philippe Gaumont. These guys are pretty happy with the situation. They've eliminated André Schmiel, who at the moment has gained 2 seconds on the rest of the pack. He's 1 minute 38 seconds behind at the moment, and if he does catch this leading group up, that will be a story to put in all of the history books, because he crashed in the first section of cobblestones. Look at this, you can hardly recognise that man on the front, but I can tell you it is Georgi Hincapie. His face and his jersey are totally black with the mud which is being thrown up here over these tough cobblestone roads in the north of France.
Well, I think all of this racing equipment will be good for training in after today, because I don't think it will ever wash up nicely again. Weinsteins, the world champion, proving to be a really solid bike rider as a world champion too, as he brings the line through. And this is Leon van Bon. I can only recognise him by his green shorts of the Mercury Viertel colours, because the rest of him is totally irrecognisable now. Just look at the state of these bikes as we swing back. 1 minute 25, I've got it now, Paul, as we've gone down the road to André Schmiel. This man is fighting himself back into Paris Roubaix, and now there's a problem at the back, and I think it was Museo had his foot off there.
That was Museo number 1 there. There's a stop there. Weinsteins has stopped as well. I think Weinsteins is going to have a bike change as well. Total chaos. You get lots of problems when the weather's like this. Lots of dirt and grit gets into the machines. Weinsteins is up. A quick bike change for him. He's up and running again. And I think we'll see 1 or 2 riders stop and wait for him. In fact, he's taken the opportunity there. Very professional move this, Phil. When you do change your bike, the spare bike doesn't normally have drinks on it. And what he's done here, watch this. He's taking the drinks off his racing machine and he takes them across to the spare. That is a man who's thinking clearly.
It is, and ever so casual. Really no hurry at all. It's only Paris-Roubaix. It's a long way to go. 160 kilometres done of the total of 254. And there's now Weinsteins gets back in, but no luxury for him of the waiting of a teammate, whereas he's just got Museo back up to the group when he waited for Johan.
There should have been a bit of panic, at least for Ronan Weinsteins, but these real pros, they never do panic in a situation like that, because either you get back or you don't. We're around about 500 metres now from the entrance into the forest of Arenberg, which is why we've got almost a bunch sprint. Everyone wants to be in the first 5. Hincapie's in about 10th position, a little bit too far back right now as they accelerate. Very shortly they'll go through the barrier, which is closed for almost every day of the year, only opened for this race and Paris-Roubaix Amateur.
That's right, because normally you have to leave your cars and you have a very pleasant stroll in the forest. It's a natural wood, a very ancient woodland at that. It's once reverberated to the marching of Napoleon's armies. Well, now it's going to revert to the rubber of very thin racing tyres. Here comes the world champion picking his way through the cars as he's now trying to get back on the tail. A most crucial stage to puncture, Paul. That was bad luck, because now we're into the forest and he's at the back of the race. When you get under that bridge there, that's the start of the cobblestones, and it's dead straight. A real Roman road, this.
Absolutely mad, this road. It goes back to the Napoleonic times. It's straight as a die, but in fact it descends somewhat, and when you do hit it normally in the dry, you'll be hitting around about 40 miles an hour. At the back here, Nico Martin, you can see picking his way across there. We have actually got fixed cameras out here right now. Somebody's gone down. I think that was Gaumont.
Gaumont has crashed there, and he's on the road and he's not getting up, and in fact he doesn't look too good. This is indeed Philippe Gaumont. Museo picks his way around, the rest of the break does as well. There's Brad, the world champion's trying to get back.
Martin has picked his way around him there. Let's have a look at that again. Hincapie's the man in the front place, and woof, he's gone straight down. These cobblestones are so slippery, it's unbelievable. Van Bon picked his way around there quite remarkably, as we now see Georgi Hincapie leading Paris Roubaix, the man who started this race as the #1 favourite from the United States, hails from New York, now lives in North Carolina, and it's devastation. You know, I have a feeling this is a very serious crash, though, for Philippe Gaumont. The team manager and the team soigneur are up alongside him, but he's not moving that leg, Phil, and that does not bode well.
And they've got to move him, because the cars have got to get through, because the chase is coming up. Schmill will be the next rider through. There's the telecom car. They're cleaning all of the team cars here, as Rabobank as well. We'll get back up to the front. Neutral service still ahead with the race direction. In the distance, it's an American, George Hincapie, now piling on the pressure. Looks like Wilfred Peters trying to get on terms.
This is amazing, because there's still an awful long way to go to the finish. This is the Forest of Arenberg. This is the most dramatic point of Paris-Roubaix right now. Just back there was Florent Bras. He's going out of the back at the moment. This is Nico Matin. His teammate Philippe Gaumont has just crashed dramatically, but Hincapie is showing them all a clean, I shouldn't say clean pair of wheels, because it's pretty dirty out there at the moment. He's showing them his tail wheel as he heads over the Forest of Arenberg. In second position there, Wilfred Peters is slipping all over the road trying to stay on the American's wheel.
And such is the luck of the draw. The rain has started to come down very heavily here in the Forest of Arenberg, as Hincapie is going alone with no teammates behind him. He can only be thinking, get through here safely and see who survives to work with him. Well, there's a rapid dash here and a gritting of the teeth by a man who has finished second and third before in this race, which is a lottery now. And this is Wilfred Peters trying to get up to George Hincapie.
Well, where are his teammates there? I think it's Servais Knaven in third place on the road. Looking further back, it looks as if that's Rolf Sorensen coming through now. Stefan Weissermann riding pretty close to the front as well. That is Knaven up there. Looking further back, I can't see Johan Museeuw, and it must be going through his mind right now. This is about the place that he crashed a couple of years ago and smashed his kneecap on this section of cobblestones. He will be happy once he gets away from here. Looking down here at the Rabobank rider, this is Sven Nys.
Oh,
Hincapie's down too.
Stop. Hincapie's fallen when the camera caught him there. He looks as though he's up and safe. Peters has gone through, never looked to anybody. He's concentrating on the central passage through the Forest of Arenberg. Hincapie in all sorts of trouble. He cannot get going. I think he's punctured.
The problem with this section of cobblestones, Phil, is it is so slippery. If you lose your momentum, it is so difficult to get going here. I don't think he's got any problem at all. His back wheel's slipped, but he can't pick up the momentum to go forwards. And if you lose that momentum, the bike slides all over the place. Wilfred Peters now is the man in front, taking up the pacemaking. Hincapie was looking so good there, but for the moment, he's still in the top 4 or 5. But in fact, he's stopped again.
He just cannot get himself going in the momentum now. There's an American flag tucked off to the left here. Well, moments ago we would have seen George Hincapie leading through, but now Peters has got himself quite a lead. He hasn't missed a pedal rev yet as he comes up to a road he knows very well in both directions in Paris-Roubaix. Wilfred Peters then, the Grand Belgian, going through as others try to match him. That's Peters from the other view. You can see his white jersey.
Absolutely flying over these cobblestones, and these cobblestones are so slippery. If you're an agile rider, Hincapie has got a front wheel problem. There's a neutral service man right alongside there. The whole of this race here, this section covered by the neutral service vehicles. Hincapie's up and riding again, and that is Nico Matin coming by him at the moment. But this is a mad section of cobblestones. It's only opened up for this bike race and the amateur version of it twice a year. For the rest of the time, it's totally closed.
Well, the exit for Wilfred Peters, a brilliant piece of cobblestone riding he's done. George Hincapie robbed of a chance to be with him there when he was setting the pace. He fell off, and then when he was trying to restart, I think he nipped his tyre and had a puncture. So further back now, Hincapie still trying to rejoin in the distance there. It could be Ludo Dierksen, but I think in fact it's Chris Peers on his wheel.
Well, this is Stefan Weissermann from Telecom. You can hardly see the pink jersey of Weissermann on the front here. A tough man, a former East German. Leon van Bonn is the next man to come through. There is Rolf Sorensen, the next man coming through. There as well, Johan Museeuw, followed by Knaven. Voigt, the world champion, made a great recovery there. Last man to get into this section of cobblestones. He did recover to get onto the back end of this tail.
Onto smooth tarmac, and it must feel smooth after that. These are the last riders of the remnants of that breakaway now, as also the brilliant servicemen on motorbikes keep these guys on. Another problem here, this is Dierksen's. Dierksen's has a puncture as well.
Rear wheel puncture for Dirksen's and Mavic. Neutral service car there very quickly indeed. The rear tail wheel normally takes about 15 seconds to change. Let's see how quick this man is doing right now. But with everybody's hands and fingers very cold, it makes it just a little bit slower. He's tightening up the quick release skewer right now. He's trying to lock it into place. Dirksen's up and running, but he's lost about 30 seconds.
Must feel like a lifetime there. The line of Flanders flag was flying for Dirksen's. As we look further down, we look at our lonely chaser here and former champion of Paris Roubaix, André Schmil. And further back down, other riders coming up now. But you know, Paul, you get the feeling that breakaway is dictating everything here now. They've come through, well, reasonably okay.
Everybody's got through fairly safely there. The man who had the most problems really was George Hincapie. Must have been a softening front tyre for Hincapie, which is why he then had to get a spare wheel from the neutral service motorbike at the side of the road. Schmil, though, doing a storming ride, but I would say when he comes out of the Forest of Arenberg, Phil, he's going to be around about 2.5 minutes behind, because it's a long time since Wilfred Peters exited this section of cobbles.
Well, these riders are hardly recognisable now. It looks like Arvis Pisiks, who is the champion of Latvia, gritting his teeth here. He was 2 hours in a coal mine as they try now to come over the cobblestones. This is a deep group here now as we look down, one or two of the names. And André Taffé is in there, third wheel.
A little further back there on the left in the blue and white jersey is Peter van Petegem. He too trying to fight his way back from illness at the start of this classic season. These riders, I would think, Phil, almost 2.5 minutes behind the leaders of this race at the moment.
Well, they have a lot of work to do, but there's plenty of time to do it in. We're reaching now 165 kilometres covered. And so we're inside 100k, only just to go to the finish. And I think behind this big group, then you can write everybody else out of the hunt today. There's Peters going through, but this group still could get back, you know.
Well, there's a long way to go. It's amazing to think. Normally you just in a situation here at Paris Roubaix when the race is only just beginning. Right now these guys are looking at 100 kilometres, 2.5 hours of racing before they get to the finishing velodrome. Looking down through the line there, we wonder what has happened to the US Postal Service today, because apart from Georgie Hincapie, I haven't seen any of the other men in this race who would be expected to help him. But it looked as if somebody was just coming through there from USPS, and a long way behind if they had wanted to help Georgie Hincapie today. Wilfred Peters now is finding himself in a lone lead situation. I'm not sure if he would want to do that with 100 kilometres to go.
Well, he's flown over the cobbles and he's maintained it. He's now heading for the pavé with a 30-second lead over a general regrouping behind. I don't know if Dirksen is back there yet. We'll find out when we get back there ourselves. This man's on the smooth stretch of roads now as he heads towards Wallers. Then he'll make a right and he'll get back into the cobblestones again as we head across country towards Orchy. This is the chase group, and a remarkable ride being done here by Jens Voigt. He must be tired, yet he's still up with the leaders.
This is going to become a very tactical situation now, because we've got 3 Domo Farm Fritz riders in this group. The man you can see there, the world champion, doing a great recovery, puncturing and changing a machine just before he came into the Forest of Arenberg. Johan Museu is in this group, as is Servais Carnarvon. They will sit on the group now, Phil, and force the other riders in the group to do a lot of work. Coming back there, a great move here by number 56, and that is one of the top riders from Cofidis here, Chris Peers. He's sitting up alongside Georgie Hincapie. This now should give the advantage for the man at the front, Wilfred Peters, to build up a lead of 1 or 2 minutes, and that will be difficult to nail back towards the end.
Well, they're not going to chase him yet. He's still got a long way to go. They know he is a carrot for them to react to because of the presence of Johan Museu in this group. But we'll go up and see him. This is the next stretch of cobblestones now. This will be Wallers and take us through to 171 kilometres. And this is a stand up and win or fall down and lose today, Paris Roubaix. This stretch not too bad, and we speak with feeling because Paul Scher, myself and some American friends rode over this next section or so. And apart from these initial potholes, Paul, it's not too bad, is it?
It's not a bad section of cobblestones. In fact, at the moment, there isn't too much mud on it either. It's been resurfaced in this part. We're going to go through a bridge here known as the Pont Gibus, which is actually nicknamed after Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle, the Frenchman who won Paris-Roubaix on 2 occasions. But just to go back to the forest of Arenberg there, Phil, a couple of years ago, I was riding Paris-Roubaix in a situation like this, a day like this. It's total chaos going into the forest. You don't really know as a bike rider what is happening. I was leading out my teammate Alain Bondu at the time, and we got into the forest in the first positions. Total chaos. When we came out of it, I looked across at Alain and said, how many riders are in front? And he said, this is the front. And then it hit me there was still 100 kilometres to go.
And that's just about what Wilfred is facing here. He's 36 and a half years of age now. This is the Pont Gibus. When I first started covering Paris-Roubaix, there was a bridge there, but that's gone now. And this is a slow-motion sweeping left-hander where you have to watch your line very carefully through that mud in the centre. But Peters is such a great bike handler, he rides this like it's almost smooth road. Latest time check we're getting, 45 seconds is lead now over that group, which is grouping at the back almost all together. Here they are.
Well, they're not actually chasing him very hard at the moment. They're spread across the road somewhat. The hammer not down at all. This will give the advantage to the lone leader, Wilfred Peters. He's got an awful long way to ride on his own, especially with the fact that there is a prevailing cross headwind for the next 40 or 50 kilometres. That is going to make it very difficult for him. I don't think he's quite got the engine to stay off the front, but he is a very special bike rider. What they will be thinking now is it's putting the advantage into the tactical court of Domo Farm Frites, and Johan Museeuw will be very happy with that. In fact, Wilfred Peters, a very big personal friend of Johan Museeuw's. They spend most of the winter months actually going on holiday together. They don't train together because they live too far apart, but they spend an awful lot of time in each other's company.
Well, I always breathe a sigh of relief when I see the field cross over those railway tracks, because that, believe it or not, is quite a busy railway line. And if those barriers do go down, then it means they'll have to stop. And if Wilfred Peters is in front, he will escape, that's for sure. We're looking at one of the heroes of the early breakaway still here now, Brad, who's having a wonderful start to the season for Festina. And he's also riding well here because he's got himself back up to the group after that rough ride over the Forest of Arenberg cobbles.
Well, we're still heading along the right-hand bend. It now straightens up towards the main road, and they'll take a left-hander off the end of this. Stefan Weissermann is the man in pink at the front for Team Telecom, being given the responsibility as team leader for the classics. He rode very well in Paris-Roubaix and Tour of Flanders last year, which is why the team, I think, have given him the respect of position of team leader going into this event. What happens very often in Paris-Roubaix is, although the team management come up alongside to give the riders drinks and take on board food, usually in Paris-Roubaix the mechanic will also lean out of the window on the tarmac stretches and spray oil onto the chains, because there is so much water and grit coming up into the chains on a day like this that it causes the gearing to jump quite a lot. So you've got to keep a very close eye on that.
Yes, absolutely. Now the riders concentrating. We're on stretch number 12 here now, and we count down to 1. Don't forget, we started at cobbles number 24 at Troisville, heading down towards the 1 as the riders make another left turn. A chance to look at the bikes here, hardly recognisable, but bearing the name Eddy Merckx, of one of the greatest bike riders of all time, and a man who excelled too in Paris-Roubaix. And so this bike being done proud now by Wilfred Peters. Even if he is nearly 37 years of age, he's had a third and a second before in this event. Almost not good enough last year for Wilfred, only 11th. But of course, his job was to make Johan Museeuw get the victory, and he did just that. Now he's clear. The gap is still going up, 46 seconds now.
He's a tough bike rider, one of the very few who I would put up alongside Sean Yates as top domestiques in the world. This man is worth his weight in gold. He does an awful lot of work for the team. He actually won a semi-classic as well, the same one that Georgi Hincapie won 4 days ago. He won Gent-Wevelgem back in 1994. And I think on that occasion he was going across the line just in front of his own teammate.
So Domo Fritz, we've waited to see them in front of our camera lens this season, the brand new team on the block, and Patrick Lefebvre, the team manager, fending all of the journalists' difficult questions until now, but he'll be feeling very happy with the way things are going so far today. 4 men still in this group, despite a bike change for Weinsteins and a puncture to Johan Museeuw. And thanks to a fall for George Hincapie, we've got 1 rider alone in front. But I wonder what would have happened there, Paul, if George hadn't have fell. And maybe Peters would have joined him and George would have been committed very early on to go for gold.
George wouldn't have wanted to be in a breakaway situation like that. That's much too far to go to the finish. 100 kilometres on a race like this and a day like this certainly is something that I wouldn't want to ask any bike rider. If I'd been his team manager and he'd come out of the Forest of Arenberg with Peters, I'd have told him to sit up and wait for the group because we're too far out from the finish. Right now, though, it's looking rather good for Peters because the last time check we got was Peters has a 1 minute advantage over this group. Dario Pieri is chasing behind at 2.5 minutes, and the group with Andre Schmiel is actually slipping away now. They're 3.5 minutes back. So Andre Schmiel's day at Paris-Roubaix is almost over. But you never can tell because this, I think, is going to be a pretty strange race on the running towards the finish.
Well, sad for Andre. These boys won't worry about his whereabouts right now. They're concentrating rather cleverly on keeping the race fairly tight. Pressure off a little bit while Peter sets the pace up front. I noticed there Jens Voigt talking in his native language to his friend Stefan Wessermann on a rival team, of course, and probably asking each other how well they're going today. It's strange, really, but they don't see each other as direct rivals when you're battling a course like this.
Well, those two riders may well have to form some kind of an alliance because there's a lot of Belgians in this group, and Domo Farm Frites are looking exceptionally strong. And also, let's not forget, there are two riders from Cofidis, the two Belgian riders, Nico Martin and Chris Peers. And we're getting information coming from the back of the race that, in fact, Philippe Gaumont, who crashed dramatically, has been evacuated by ambulance to the hospital in Valenciennes.
Well, let's hope he's okay. I was a bit worried the way he fell on his right leg there. He either could have hurt his hip or indeed his knee. And let's hope we haven't got another situation like we had a couple of years back with Johan Museo. Anyway, the race going on at the front here now. Winter so far stretching into spring, and the rapeseed on the right there just about breaking into yellow flower as Wilfred races past. He's really no intention of slowing down here. This is a serious intent. His idea is to hurt the chasers and to make them come after him because he's thinking of giving Johan Museo an easy ride now. And Johan wouldn't be a surprise to any of us anymore if he could produce the finish that we all know he's capable of.
The only thing that this man's thinking about at the moment, I'm sure the word has come forward from the team management to say, right, ride as hard as you can because you'll take the pressure off our team. They can sit in that group of riders behind and slipstream and maybe just not get involved in any of the fracas over the cobblestones. And who knows, if your advantage goes up to 3 or 4 minutes, we could turn the tables and cause a massive surprise in Paris-Roubaix today. But the important thing for Domo Farm Frites is to get a lot of publicity out of this race and put pressure on the other guys in this chasing group here.
62 seconds now, so he's pulling away. And this is the breakaway. Dierkson's on the front at the moment. Chris Peers, Leon Van Bon, Georgie Hincapie, Stefan Wessermann. Brada's got back. Also in there, Jens Voigt, and not least, of course, Museo and Servais Canavan and Roman Weinsteins. They're a really solid group down there.
They're not working very hard though, Phil. You can see obviously the Domo guys are taking it easy, not going to the front very much. Hincapie moving forward because he wants to encourage the other single riders in this group who are not represented at the front to go forward and make sure that they keep ticking by. But look at that, Johan Museo moves up into second. He will soft shoe it just a little bit there to try and slow down the tempo on the front and try and allow Wilfred Peters to build up a little bit more advantage over the group. They're facing now another section of cobblestones in about 3 kilometres time, and that section of cobblestones is going to be 3.7 kilometres long. They're fairly good cobblestones, but I tell you what, the length of them makes them very difficult.
They are indeed, and again we speak with feeling because we've ridden those as well 4 days ago, but I have to say they were drier then than they are today following overnight rain. As we're still with this group here, and it's nice to see that Rolf Sorensen is right here in this group, a very good rider from Denmark. And a typical move from him would be a lone break nearer the end. It certainly wouldn't be the sort that Peters is doing right now. There is Leon Van Bon. No, it's not, it's Sven Nys. Almost can't recognise anybody anymore now. Here comes Leon as he goes through. Just doing enough to say they're going through and off without disrupting the pace too much on the teammates of Domo. There's Ludo Dierkson's almost calmed down after his puncture. Awkward change it was too, so he's had a tough chase to get back, but he seems to have recovered.
Difficult situation for him to be in right now because his friend and training partner is the man off the front of the main field. We might find a situation where he doesn't really want to chase him down too much and he'll leave it up to the other riders in this group. The impetus not great right now. I think they will have a status quo for the next 30 or 40 kilometers. Having one lone leader is not a dangerous situation right now unless he starts to build up massive amounts of time and approaches a 5-minute margin. But I think what we'll find is they will accelerate over the cobblestones to keep themselves out of difficulty and then slow down on the tarmac, and that will probably stabilise the advantage of this man, Wilfred Peters, who for the moment is still starting to build on his lead.
This is Pavé 11, 3.7 kilometres in 2 slices. He gets a small bit of respite, but even so, they are dry now. The weather up this part of northern France, thankfully not as bad. The showers are very unpredictable. They're coming through and just dumping on certain sections of the race, and other places don't get rain at all. But the good thing is, Paul, the spectators keep moving around this course, and they don't just see the race pass by once.
Well, if you know how to get your way around Parиж Rubé, it's pretty impressive. You can see it 4 or 5 times because it's all through the fields of the northern part of France, and there's a lot of side roads here. If you have a good map, you can pick your way through and see the road on a number of occasions. And most of these people who come out to see the race, they actually take portable televisions with them as well, so they can keep up to scratch on just exactly where the race is unfolding. This is the end of the first half of this long cobblestone sections. When Peters gets to the end of it, he'll take a right turn by the 2 big water towers there, and the Lions of Flanders out to cheer him on, and they have nothing more exciting for them to have a Belgian leading this race.
Well, he's off that little stretch for the moment as he sprints out of the saddle. It's like a renter crowd, really. They all rush into the buses and they race round to another section of the course. Just look at this massive crowd as they turns there. There's the entry of the peloton. They're timed at 1:32 there. So they are 1:32. He is still pulling away and riding solid.
Well, it's obvious if you look at the tempo here. We've got one rider on the front, Ludo Dirksen, setting not a very rapid pace just now, which is why Wilfred Peters is able to build up on his advantage. The 2 Cofidis riders are sitting at the back of the group, and Florian Bras is also back there. I think he's just hoping to survive right now, and there you get a chance to see the speed of the riders over the cobblestones. As we look now, they're going to take in the second section of this very long 3.7 kilometre road of cobblestones. There's still an awful lot of cobblestones to go to the finish, 10 more sections and some still very difficult ones. I think one of the most decisive ones is the Pavé de l'Arbre, which comes at around about 25 kilometres to go to the finish. Dirksen quite content to ride on the front, but he's got all of the Domo riders on his wheel and they will not help him at all.
And Museo was the first man. He looked really cool there. There's Sven Nys, Rolf Sorensen, Chris Piers. These are the riders still happily tagged on, 13 of them there, trying to get on terms with the 14th man who's away. And that's Wilfred Peters. There's our brave television cameraman. There's the shot he's getting for us. And George Hincapie, is it right now on the front? Yes, it is. I can hardly recognise him now. A big George coming through onto smooth bit of pavé here. And he's very alert today, George, and looking so strong.
This is the unfortunate thing for George being on US Postal Service in this particular race, because he doesn't have any teammates with him. He could do with somebody like Ekimov being in this group right now, or Cedric Vasseur, who could come to the front and keep the tempo on. George shouldn't have to do that kind of work himself, and that could well pay when we get to the final 20 or 30 kilometres, when the big attacks come, and I'm sure they will come from Johan Museo. This race at the moment seems to be being set up ideally for the man in second position there, Museo, who looks very comfortable on these cobblestones, but so too does Ronan Weinsteins, the current world champion.
Well, frankly, I'm stunned by the way Museo rides. He's such a brilliant cyclist. When you speak to people who know Johan and know his mentality, they talk in glowing terms about this man who can apply himself to certain events. And one of those events is Parиж Rubé. He just turns himself on for this event and he doesn't do a thing wrong. And there he is now, second wheel, riding on the wheel of a man who's used to tough roads like this, because he's won the Peace Race, that race across Berlin, Prague and Warsaw so many times, and you often encounter, especially in Poland, roads like this. And that's Stefan Westermann driving up front. There is the group. The gap, as I said, 1:32, the last check we got. And it's just line astern again, all under the impetus of one rider.
Well, Johan Museo is a real tough bike rider. Ronan Weinsteins has gone to the front. In fact, no, it's not Ronan Weinsteins. This is one of the Mercury riders in one of the second groups further down. There's Andre Schmiel. In front of him is Andrea Taffy. And this is they're on the same section of cobblestones right now.
I think that's Van Petegem on the top, on the front, and looking down there's an awful lot of Rabobank riders trapped in this group now. We've got a time check of over 3 minutes to this group, so they're losing ground at the moment. As we continue now back up with the other riders, this is thankfully a little bit better weather-wise, but the breakaways are staying well clear of any chase being organised.
Well, these riders are an awful long way behind. The last official time gap we had for them was around about 3.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And the pressure doesn't really seem to be on very much at all. But just going back to what we were saying before about Johan Museeuw, he's been professional since 1988. He's got almost 100 victories in his career, Phil, but he really has, I would say, have been the classics rider of the 90s. Before that, we regarded Sean Kelly as being the classic man of the 80s, but Museeuw is a man who specialises in one-day bike races, which is strange because when he started off his career, he was regarded very much as a bunch sprinter, the very same way that Eric Zabel seems to be developing right now. Zabel, although he was a great bunch sprinter when he turned professional, he now seems to be able to ride the one-day races as well.
I think it comes with age, unfortunately. The twitch fibres tend to disappear, but the strength gets double as to what you start out with as a young pro bike rider. Looking at Wilfred Peters, the man who has taken the bull by the horns well and truly today. As he left the Forest of Arlenberg, he continued on when he saw George Hincapie fall down, and has continued on now and built a lead of over 1.5 minutes.
Well, Hincapie putting the pressure on the second half of this very long section of cobblestones, and he's riding right off the front at the moment. Sitting on his wheel, tucked very nicely in there, was one of the Domo riders, and in fact it's Johan Museeuw in person. These guys are very good at marking the men they feel who are dangerous. You can see Hincapie really putting the pressure on. He needs to sit back because he needs a little work to come from the other riders if they want to pull back Wilfred Peters. He doesn't need to do it on his own.
The cobblestones, are still plenty of them left here as we're heading to sector 10 now, and the split in the group here. This is a definite split now, and it looks as though Hincapie's dragging Museeuw, Knaven, Veensteins was there as well, and Dirksen's also there, and it looks as though Westerman is one of the riders who's missed, along with other weaker riders, including Rolf Sorensen. So we have a split on Pavé strip number 11, Paul. And this is going to put time between them. Look at this massive crowd here. End of number 11 now for Ludo Peters. So he's stretched by about a kilometre difference as they come out now. So Wilfred Peters, Ludo's long since retired. Wilfred Peters is now still leading here as we go off pavé stretch number 11.
Well, as Wilfred Peters settles down to the job in hand, you can see here Georgie Hincapie, Phil, is setting the pace over this section of cobblestones, and Johan Museeuw was not happy at how close the motorbike was getting there because that was being used by Hincapie to accelerate. 4 men now going off the front. They've literally exploded this group over the cobblestone section, and a lot of riders now being left far behind.
Well, this stretch of cobbles, as far as holes are concerned, isn't quite so bad. This is pure speed and strength now, and clearly the stronger men have got to the front of this group. Stefan Westerman, Jens Voigt must be tired, he's further behind, but Servais Knaven is here, sitting up behind Dirksen. Then we've got Museeuw. Georgie Hincapie is the man doing the power. Well, you can bet your life that Museeuw won't be, because he's still got Peters up front, but there's definitely a reaction here now.
Well, if this breakaway situation was at 25 kilometres to go, I would say this is the winning break. This would be a great situation to be in, but, you know, we're still looking at around about 85 kilometres to go to the finish line, so it's not a good situation. I would say they need to sit up now and wait for a couple of riders to come back from behind who obviously have heard it. But this, Phil, look at this. This is Ronan Weinsteins. We've got 6 men now, 3 men from the same team, Domo Farm Frites. They're being joined there by 51, which is Nico Matin. Now, the team today who are dominating are Domo Farm Frites. It looks like they've got everything spot on once again at Paris Roubaix.
Well, I think Museeuw was delighted there to see the arrival of Veensteins. That's completed the men he wanted around him, and he looks pretty contented now because a little bit of a shout there. He's having a word with Nico Matin. Guy wants him to do some work as well. He's going to say, well, I've no reason to chase. Gets George to go by him as well. He's just checking again on Veensteins. The other rider up here is Servais Knaven. George we've seen, and this is a very, very powerful 6-man group now, especially when you have the Iron Horse himself, Dirksen's sitting up there, his third wheel, I think, at the moment.
This is impressive. This team has only just been formed this year. They took the major element, the Belgian element of the Mapei squad to begin the Domo Farm Frites team. They've had a difficult time so far, performing well, but this race is a race that the team manager, Patrick Lefevre, always seems to have motivated his men for. Going forward now, Museo seems to be quite content to actually set a bit of the pace making at the front here, as he now looks at this group and feels that they are in a very strong situation. Now, they probably don't want anybody to come back from the rear.
Well, we've left behind Stefan Weissman, Sven Nys, Jens Voigt, Leon van Bon. Surprisingly, Leon van Bon and Sorensen, they have been dropped, and we'll just see if they can get back. But the gap is opening at the moment. It is stretching to around about 45 seconds to that chase group, so they've opened that quickly.
Very rapidly indeed. It's interesting to note, though, that in fact the Domo Farm Frites boys are starting to ride, because they're looking at a situation where if they do catch Wilfred Peters, they will once again still be in super competitive, super condition, because they'll have 4 men in a 7-man breakaway group, and they can actually do any tactics that they want, and they should certainly come out the winner with one of that combination. Section cobbles number 10 sections of cobblestones to go. These ones a little bit wet as we come onto the cobblestone section. After this section, we've got a long road of tarmac before we head up to the section called Orchy.
But this is a long section, Paul, just over 5 kilometres, 3 miles of cobbles now, a little bit of smooth and then back onto them again. We are taking the race up to 180 kilometres covered now, and Wilfred Peters is just literally crashing his way through to Roubaix, knowing that he has the strength of a great team around him, because that's what they are now. They are playing all of the ace cards here. People like Hincapie and Matan Dirksens must be feeling a little bit claustrophobic.
Well, they will be surrounded by all of the Domo Farm Frites riders. Georgie Hincapie in a very good situation. The downside for Hincapie, Phil, really is the fact that he doesn't have any teammates there. If he does have a mechanical incident, he will have a hard time riding himself back into the race. But this man now has just got one thing on his mind: to ride as long and as hard as he can at the front of the bike race, taking the pressure off his own teammates. Behind, he has the ideal combination there of Johan Museo, Servais Carnarvon and Ronan Weinstein's the current world champion. But it looks as if, in fact, there may well be a general regrouping, because that little group of about 7 riders is about to make contact on this section of cobbles.
Well, they've done very, very well to bridge that, just in time to be in trouble again, I would suspect, because that's the entry there of pavé number 10. Dirksen's at the other end of this first sector of pavé 10. And there's a little bit of a dizzy look at the surface and what's it like as we gently come up behind the wheel here of Roman Weinsteins, who's having a tremendous race. Despite his problems, he still remained the faithful team helper of Johan Museu, having brought him back up to the race once and brought himself up once as well. He's now crossed the gap, but I think we're going to see these riders rejoin, and sooner or later they're going to force their way around our cameraman, I suspect.
Well, Johan Museu won't be too happy with those riders coming back, because I think this is an ideal situation right now for the Domo Farm Frites. There was Van Bon coming around, Weserman recovering as well on the back there, Hendricks, the man still surviving on the back. The last 2 riders in this group are in fact the members of the early 6-man breakaway of today, Florent Bras and Jens Voigt. Voigt, the German rider on Crédit Agricole in the green shorts there, having a very good ride here today.
Superb riding by Bras. He really is working well to stay in with this very select group of accomplished hard men of world cycling, and that must also apply to Leon van Bon there, the Dutch champion currently, riding in the new colours for Mercury Viatel and hopefully riding for the place in the Tour de France. They've certainly deserved it, but they are having a spell of bad luck in these classics too.
It was good to see Greg LeMond at the start this morning, looking a lot slimmer than he has over the last couple of years, and very excited to mix it again over in Europe with the international cycling circuit. And he too, I think, come across for some politicking to try and get his team, Phil, into the Tour de France when the selections are made in around about a month's time. Stefan Weserman having a bit of difficulty here, trying to reintegrate the front end of this group, but he looks very comfortable. You see the power, he sits very rock solid on his machine there. Top end of his body hardly moving at all, and he's going to fly by Van Bon, who obviously was popped off the back.
And Van Bon, I'm sure, will try to lift the pace. He's a fighter, but Stefan Weserman going through there, we'll have to leave him. Otherwise the cameraman might find himself in trouble with the race referees. We're going back up to the leaders here, and it's still the same little group. They haven't quite bridged that gap, have they? This is our 6-man group. There are 8 in that chase, being led by Van Bon. Rather one of desperation, I think, on this stretch of cobblestones.
It's quite strange because I thought that group was going to make contact immediately on this section of cobblestones, but you can see whenever this front group does hit the cobblestone section, they accelerate quite dramatically. A lot of work being done by Ludo Dirksens and of course Georgi Hincapie, who's sitting at the moment in about 5th position, very sensibly just keeping an eye on the other riders in the group. That's Weseman trying to come across the gap on his own, shadowed there by Van Bon, and Pizik still riding very much to the front.
Just look at the state of these riders here. The rain, as you can see by the umbrella, just sprinkling down at the moment. It's not torrential. This is the face of Rolf Sorensen here. You know, there's every chance that these are fighters, these men. They're not going to give up very easily at all. Sven Nys is the least experienced of them in 3rd place, but he's trying now to bring them all back. That's de Klerk right on the wheel there of Sorensen. Then Jens Voigt, those long legs of his. He's a powerful bike rider, is Jens, broad at the back. These 5 riders are slowly but surely crossing the gap.
Sorensen there's the first man on that group of 5, and he seems to be having a hard time following the pace. And at the front, we can see the current world champion is also having a hard time following the pace being set by these riders over this section of cobblestones. But he is a very courageous rider. He was unlucky, Phil, there a few moments ago to puncture at probably the worst possible time in the whole of the race to puncture 500 metres before the forest of Arenberg. He has recovered, and his jersey looks absolutely stunning here compared to the front shots we get of these riders. The World Champions jersey with the rainbow bands around it is really riding well in the Classics this year, and it's great to see that a world champion can ride at the front of the one-day Classics.
47 kilometres in total. We're still left with quite a chunk to do as we're on the longest double stretch here that totals 5.1 kilometres. We're off the end of that little lot, and these boys now try to shut down the gap. But the leaders here are making it very, very difficult. And let's not forget, as we occasionally do, that man who's still out in front, Wilfred Peters. Nobody able to get to him at the moment.
This is another group further back down the road there.
This is Schmil.
This is Schmil trying to ride across here with Peter van Petegem, and right on his wheel, the rider from the Lampre team there is actually Maximilian Chiandri. As he said before the start, this is the first time he's had the possibility to ride a very wet Paris Roubaix. A great Tour of Flanders last week for him, and I think approaching 35 years of age, Chiandri now is having a rejuvenation and riding a lot better than he did in the last couple of years.
Well, it's nice to see Van Petegem. He's done a good ride to break out of the group and catch up with André Schmil. Schmil, I'm sure, was happy to see them arrive alongside, but the sad news is they're 3 minutes and 40 seconds down, and I don't see them bridging that gap. But you never know. They are excellent bike riders, great pedigrees, and all of them know how well it is to ride Paris-Roubaix. Here's the group here. Number 51, Nico Matan. Number 3 is Servais Knaven. Number 6 is the world champion. And he is in with a real shot now of becoming the World Cup leader. And Weseman is the first of the emissaries to get across from the group behind.
Well, that's a good comeback because he was around about 200 metres behind at one stage, so he's ridden very deeply into his reserves to try and pull himself back up to this group. We're now looking at a 7-man chase group, but still the odds very much on the side of Domo Farm Frites as we come into the second part of this 2-section cobblestones, which, as you said, is almost 5.5 kilometres long in total.
George taking them on there. He's got first position now, George Hincapie, as he takes them down the centre of the road. Weseman did well to get himself onto this cobblestone section before it started. The others obviously not quite on, otherwise they'll be round our TV camera. But we're looking from the helicopter here now. There you can see clearly the 7 men. So when Weseman passed Leon Van Bon, Leon could not lift his pace and grab his wheel. And when we look round to the left, we might get some idea as to what has happened to the rest of that breakaway. But George is the leader now, the man who loves Paris-Roubaix and is looking to try and beat the best ever finish of Greg LeMond, who's got the best American finish in this event of 4th.
Well, Chris Peers and Van Bon are a little bit off the back of this group right now, trying to integrate with the leaders. As we get a look here at the man who is leading this bike race, this is Wilfred Peters. He now is riding a long, lone race at the front, but he's never really had his advantage very much more than a minute and a half. And the last time check we had, it was hovering at 53 seconds. So the group behind have got him in sight, Phil, nearly all of the time on these long, straight roads, but he will not give up. He will ride at the front for as long and as hard as he can to put pressure on his on the opponents in the group behind, as this man is right now, Georgi Hincapie and Ludo Dirksen's. And you see the 3 riders from Domo Farm Frites, they're just sitting there letting everybody else do the work. And once again, Stefan Weissermann there in trouble, getting shelled just off the back. Maybe too much of an effort for him to try and ride across the gap.
Well, Weissermann dangling off the back here, and George and Dirksen's feeling a little ostracised because the other 3 riders on the same team as the man in the breakaway. And what great numerical odds they are. And for that reason, you cannot discount that Peters will not ride this race all the way at the front down to the finish at Roubaix. But a fine piece of pedalling again by Stefan as he comes back up to the tail of the breakaway. And it looks like the back seat there of Nico Matan.
Well, he recovered very well there to ride onto the back, because normally on a section of cobblestones like this, Phil, if you are popped off the back, you don't have a chance at all of getting back into the group. But he seems as if he's recovered somewhat, and he's riding himself back up to join the group, making it again 7 men chasing from behind.
Now we mustn't get too excited, but the sun has just peeped from behind the clouds. Well, it'll be nice and pleasing for the riders and dry all that cake mud on them. There's a few little pieces of cake mud just for our lens here, as Stefan Weissermann spits it up off his back tyre. But the German rider, who is back, been training for a long time in Australia, quite a few weeks in fact, throughout December and January. He has good form, and this is one of the races he'd love to do well in right now. He's made a big effort there to rejoin, and he's done it without the rest, and we're not too sure where the rest are just now. Maybe we'll catch a glimpse of them, but they obviously haven't come back.
Well, Ludo Dirksen seems to be weakening a little bit now. The pace over these cobbles is not as high as it was just earlier. When they come to the end of this cobblestone section, they have a long section on the smooth roads of around about 10 kilometres, that's 6 miles. And then they come to a very difficult sections at the section of Orchy, and that's when the race really does start to hot up, because that section of Orchy is the next really muddy section of cobblestones they're going to hit.
And here is poor old Stefan again in big trouble. He's again detached from the back. He just can't ride these cobbles like the boys at the front just now. He's taken the less cobble section off on the bend there, and he looks as though he's got a problem with his pedal pull. Now, I mean, there's no comparison with me and him, but when I was riding the cobbles, my foot kept jumping off the pedal because of the vibration, and he seems to have a similar problem.
Well, the one problem could be, and I think that is his problem, why he keeps coming off the back of the group here, it's not a problem of physical, it's a mechanical problem. Very often the problem is that riders have got overshoes on. You can see he's wearing overshoes right now, and it means that your foot doesn't get into the pedal quite properly, and they can then clip out, and that could be his problem. There's also the added problem of a lot of mud and grit getting into the bottom of the shoes. You see, it's just popped out. That's twice in one section of cobblestones, but he doesn't want to give up. He knows this is an important breakaway to be in, but he's going to be put under a lot of pressure if that foot doesn't get resolved.
Well, in fairness, when he does put his foot back in, he's got a lot of strength there. He just pedals back up to the tail of that group as they're bringing 7 riders off Sector 10 now and onto the highway. This is Servaes Knaven taking on board food before the next escapade, and a little word of advice too here for Johan Museo. And meanwhile at the front, trouble for the leader.
Well, I think this is a problem with his bottle carriers. This is something that very often happens in Paris Roubaix with the bottle carriers and the vibrations, and Wilfred not very happy at all there, because these guys are not used to actually doing that kind of moving repair as the team mechanics is in the car behind are. Now let's have a quick look there. You can see he's now carrying his bottle on the down tube holder there. That must be that he had a problem with the bottle carrier on his machine, but he seems to be getting back down now to the job in hand. His advantage still Phil, hovering at 50 seconds, but he still looks exceptionally strong. He's riding a very concentrated rhythm here at the front, keeping himself very much concentrated on the job in hand.
Well, surely his job here is to just bury himself, to stay with his maximum strength he's got, not give a thought of the finish at Roubaix, knowing that as long as he can stay out there, he is taking all of the pressure off the boys behind. They are in such a strong position right now, the Domo boys, and they know it, of course. He'll know exactly where they are. We're still not getting too many time checks, but we are talking, I think, of still a good minute here.
I think it's going to stretch out though, because you can see a lot of discussions happening. This is, as I said, a very long section of smooth, good road, so riders getting their chains greased, getting everything oiled and repairs done before they come up to the section of cobblestones at Orchy, which is a very dramatic section of cobblestones known as the Road of Prayers. And unfortunately, after the Road of Prayers, it's called the Road of the Abattoir. So one or two riders going to find themselves nailed along there.
There is Canavan. This is Westerman. Seems to have sorted out his foot problems at the moment.
In fact, he's taken his shoe covers off there, Phil, so that may well be what the problem was for Stefan Westerman. You can see the white shoes now. Before he had those aerodynamic shoe covers over the top.
And Nico Matin was the other rider who's come there, and we're back up with the leader now. Lovely summer's day now, but it isn't summer, of course. It's April and it's extremely cold. But Wilfred Peters is getting on with a great job here, having broken away in the forest of Arenberg. He's now ploughing on through the lovely little town of Orchy, and then what is a rather nasty stretch of cobblestones just around the corner.
Well, he's in the town right now. He's probably 2 kilometres away from that section of cobblestones, and again, it's sort of two sections of cobblestones bonded together by a smooth tarmac left-hand bend in the middle. The distance of that section of cobblestones is 1.7 kilometres, very long, and in the past it's been exceptionally muddy, and we have seen some dramatic crashes in the corner at the end where a couple of years ago I remember Franco Ballerini going straight on and into the crowd.
The boys here on the front slowly coming back together, I think. I think this breakaway is swelling. There's been a hard chase being put up by the others. We'll see who has got back, if anybody, as Dierksens goes through. Matin looks over his shoulder. Oh yes, Leon Van Bon has rejoined, the rider on the right here, Servais Canavan. And I think Chris Peers has got up for Cofidis as well. So we've got a bigger group. There are riders missing though, and we'll try and find out who they are. I don't see I saw Van Bon, he was there, that's right, yeah.
This group now is going to be 9 riders strong. They are approximately 50 seconds behind, and there's another group of riders 2 minutes 10 behind on the road at the moment. So we're still looking at a pretty serious situation for these riders. Although there are 9 men in the group now, it may well change tactically, because although we have 3 riders from Domo Farm Freaks, we've got 2 Cofidis riders, Nico Matin and Chris Peers. So that will change the physiognomy of the group, and they will then probably find allies in Stefan Westerman and George Hincapie. And I'm sure that slightly later on, these riders will work together to try and pull it out. That's a confirmation of the board telling us 50 seconds is the deficit they have on Wilfred Peters at the moment.
Well, they've kept him. He hasn't exactly ridden away from them, has he? Despite all of the problems here and the fact that 3 riders in this group at least are not working at all. This is the face of a very determined Roman Veensteins, world champion this year. And this group more or less all back together, I think. I think everybody has rejoined, so we've got the same group chasing now that we've had for some time. Coming up to the top end of the village here now, we make a turn. We're leaving the town of Orchy now, a little bit of an industrial estate area when we cross the highway. Then we find a little track down the side that disappears onto a cobbled stretch of road. In fact, if it wasn't for this cobbled stretch of road, it would be a no-through route, because you wouldn't be able to get there because of the auto route which travels between Paris and Versailles.
Wilfred Peters now in a few moments, Phil, is going to take the right-hand corner. He's round the back end of the motorway. On the left-hand side, he'll see a pedestrian bridge, and he will know then that he will turn almost immediately to the right, and he'll be on the section of cobblestones known as the Chemin des Prières, the road of prayers, and he will certainly be praying for a victory today, because as you said, he's finished 3rd and 2nd in Paris Roubaix, and if things worked out strangely, he could find himself in a position of being the leader and the winner of this bike race. But with his advantage never really stretching much more than the 1 minute, I find it very hard to believe that Wilfred Peters is going to win this bike race. This is it. This is the next section of cobblestones, and you can see it is on occasions very muddy indeed, and a very popular section of cobblestones for the spectators to come to.
And the black and white flag there is the flag of Brittany here in France, and they've come down for the spectacle of the Northern French race, which is in the department by the end of the Pas de Calais. And Picardy, and it's a lovely area of France, this, some great cycling roads. There's the USA flag too, and they've got every reason to fly that flag high today, because George Hincapie, he may be outnumbered at the moment, but he is riding absolutely superbly. The cobbles have almost disappeared on this section beneath the mud. This is a farm track used perhaps by cows and the odd tractor normally, and not certainly by cyclists.
It's hard to believe we're in northern France here, because the majority of these flags at the side of the road are the flags of the Lion of Flanders, and that is the nickname they give to Johan Museo, who is in this group right now. And there's a little sign coming onto the cobblestone section there which actually said Johan Museo is the Lion King. The Lion King is a nickname which is normally given to Mario Cipollini, But certainly I have to say Johan Museeuw is the king of the classics. But the man who's king of this group at the moment today, Phil, is Ludo Dirksen's, because every time there's a section of cobblestones, he's right on the front, hammering along, trying to blow everybody to smithereens.
And although the Lion King's Seiko team is here, by the way, Big Mario certainly is not, and none of the Seiko riders have been seen up near the front runners today. It's not really a race for them. In fact, it's a race for the rugged men from Belgium and the surrounding countries of that nation. Here we are then on this is Leon van Bon, slipping slowly backwards and not looking at all good there, Paul. I think he's losing ground pretty rapidly.
He is. It's all because of the pressure there. The front two riders on the far right-hand side there. That is Dirksen's and Hincapie. And in fact, Johan Museeuw has also been left behind on this section of cobblestones. There is a world champion. In fact, he stopped.
This is Peter. This is Museeuw. Museeuw here at the head of the race has got a flat tyre. Now, this would reduce the odds a little bit. Was Weinstein's going to hang off again? I didn't see him waiting back there. As again, cold hands and thick gloves means it's hard to adjust the skewers.
There's no panic from Museeuw at all there, but you know this is a very slow wheel change. He knows it's a slow wheel change. His own mechanic would have got a mouthful of insult for that, but he's up and running again. He's on his machine, but he will have lost serious time. Now, what will happen in the group in front, Phil, is the other Domo Farm Frites riders will not work at all now, and we may well see, if they believe that this man is going to win, he's having a hard time. You see, these overshoes are causing problems for the riders getting their feet back into the clips, but Museeuw has lost, I would say, around about 30 seconds with that wheel change, and with the speed in front being done by Georgi Hincapie and Ludo Dirksen's, this could be the turning point of the race.
Well, just listen to the crowd here. You'd think we were in Belgium and not France, as Museeuw has punctured. He comes flying off that stretch of pavé, but it continues, I'm afraid, Johan, as he now tries to turn an enormous gear here and get it going very well.
That's a huge gear he was ticking over there. This is a monstrous crowd as well that's turned out for this section of cobblestones. He's sitting in the middle and he will look as far up the road as he can to try and ascertain just exactly where the rest of the group is. Very unfortunate for him, Phil, that the puncture came just at the point when Hincapie and Dirksen's were attacking up the road. So we could find that his deficit is around about 40-45 seconds when we come to the end of this cobblestone section. There's the neutral service car, a very slow wheel change for him, and Museeuw will look at that again. Servais Knaven has caught the two leaders, so now we have the three chasers, I should say, making a three-man chase. One man up the road, which is Wilfred Peters, three men chasing, and now it looks as if there's going to be a very long, hard chase by Johan Museeuw.
Well, Knaven will do nothing here. He'll be a little confused as to exactly what he should do, looking over his shoulder there to see what's happened to Johan. He'll know he's had a flat tyre, and he'll just sit behind the American-Belgian tandem and hope they stay under control. Now there's the service vehicle back with these three. We're looking about 40 seconds or so up the road to Peters, and a puncture to Hincapie as well. Well, we never saw that. There's a puncture to George Hincapie, pushed back into the race.
That was bad luck, but good luck that the neutral service vehicle was there very quickly indeed. Hincapie up and riding again. This is his second flat tyre of the day. Race television moving forward quite rapidly now. Let's see who's just in front of him. This is Ronan Weinstein, so he's been caught and passed by several riders. Nico Martin is the rider wearing 51. A little further up the road we'll get a chance to see just how this section of cobblestones has literally dynamited the race to pieces. This is Stefan Weissermann, Servais Knaven, so in fact this is quite a recovery by Stefan Weissermann as well. Again, Phil, mad, unbelievable problems he's having there with his pedals. He's not going to be a happy camper, but he has to. There's nothing he can do right now. If they've changed his bike and tried a different pedal shoe combination, it is still nothing he can do on the roads of Paris Roubaix right now. He's just got to live with that.
But how frustrating it is, and if you know, when your foot slips off the pedals, you clip your ankle, and it is so painful. And Stefan just gets on with the job. He's such a hard man. And he's got himself into the group here now, and these three are the first three on the road chasing the leader, and they keep on changing. We've seen that, but at the moment it's Weissermann, Dirksen's and Servais Knaven in that order.
It's still hovering at around about 40 to 50 seconds for the lone leader, but you can see now Stefan Weissermann very concentrated, a real stocky, strong bike rider, made a name for himself in the peace race, but certainly last year in the classics I think the team realised that he was a man who could be a favourite, and they've said since the start of this season that they feel that this man wearing 68 here, Weissermann, has got a great chance of winning Paris-Roubaix. A few moments ago the whole of the race tactics would have been dominated by Domo Farm Frites, but in the matter of one section of cobblestones, all of the Domo riders have disappeared. We've got Weinstein's chasing in a small group behind, and further back down the road, the Lion of Flanders himself, Johan Museeuw, put into difficulty with a very badly timed flat tyre.
Oh, watch out, because I really don't know exactly where they all are positioned at the moment. Hincapie also chasing, of course, and we haven't seen him come back. There's a big cheer for Museeuw, the Lion King, written in English, which was rather interesting, as we see the three riders here still chasing Wilfred Peters. It would be nice if our camera could now take a searcher down the road, because as far as we know, everybody is up and riding. They are not too far behind. Hincapie is with Museeuw, we understand, and Weinsteins is riding with Nico Matan, and they're all getting themselves reorganised. These riders continuing though, because you never know just when it'll be your turn to have bad luck.
Well, Carnarvon now, this is in fact Johan Museeuw just getting onto the tail of Ronan Weinsteins, the world champion. So we've now got 4 riders chasing here. In this group is Georgi Hincapie and Nico Matin. So it's a 4-man chase group. A little further up the road we can see the red car, so they're about to get onto the tail of another group. But this is what happens when you come out of a section of cobblestones. It can be absolute and total chaos.
Up the road are the 3 riders. It looks like 7 will become the leading chase group again. Just gone past 50 to go there. Still 50 kilometres to go. Just more than 200 ridden right now. And 1 or 2 have had more than their fair share of problems today, as an acceleration again from the pack. And it's Big George who's turning the screw this time. He is riding superbly. A different rider this year now. So confident. It's all come from that big win in Ghent-Wevelgem.
This is Chris Peers and Leon Van Bon, another group of 2 riders trying to pull themselves back into the leading group at the moment. But in fact, I think Van Bon having a hard time. You saw the quick flick of the arm there. That was to ask the rider in second position to come forward, and Van Bon couldn't do that. These are the 3 chasers. Dirksen on the front, followed by Weseman and Carnarvon. And at a roundabout, in fact, it's not even worth giving a time check there, because they've just integrated the group. 7 riders now chasing 1 lone leader, Wilfred Peters.
And they are sticking together like limpets despite whatever happens here. This is Dirksen's, the strong man from Belgium.
Hi, I'm Greg LeMond. You're watching World Cycling Productions.